This is no more than a session recap of one of my home campaigns. The campaign is The Mystery of the Black Hand, and we played our third session last night. The session started off with everyone leveling up, and that took about 2 hours for everybody to finish leveling up. Then, after everybody did level up, we spent another half hour debating whether or not we were going to divide treasure, or they were going to divide treasure. Pretty much one player did not want to, and the other four did. Now, the one player said they didn't have anything good. There's 2 humans in the group, and the rest have dark vision. One of the items is Goggles of Night, which are basically grant you dark vision. If you already have dark vision, it doubles the distance. They have some gloves of swimming and climbing that gives them a bonus to swimming and climbing checks. They have a +1 maul at nighttime. It's called a lunar maul in my game. It only works at nighttime. They had 2 potions of vitality, a wand of magic missile, and a ring of protection from necrotic damage. Or not protection, ring of resistance from necrotic damage. So necrotic damage is half. They had been fighting zombies the previous session. So I feel like the necrotic ring would automatically, oh, hey, this is kind of important. But the fact that none of the players really stood up strong and said, look, it doesn't make sense to leave all these in a pouch somewhere that we can't use. So they decided that, okay, everyone can use something, but it's not considered theirs technically until we have more magic items to choose from. Okay. They gave the cleric the 2 potions of vitality, which is fine, whatever they choose to do. They're the party. I'm just the DM. But it was just kind of interesting to hear the arguments about it. And I feel like they have a lot actually right now that they could use. But anyway, so we played, and it basically started with them coming up to a monument outside of a cave. They came through a clearing, and then about 150 feet in front of them, there was this monument, and then 50 feet past that was the cave entrance. It looked like a natural cavernous opening. As they got close to it with the rogue, they have a sorcerer who has sneaking, like high sneak and things like that. And so they sent her up, and she peeked in the cave and, scoped it out a little, and then came back without going into the cave. So, yeah, and I described like that they're on the inner side of the cave right there. There was like a hand grasping a wrist, which then grasped another wrist, and it went all the way top. They both this design went all the way to the top where they came, and then they just were 2 hands holding each other. So anyways, when the players went into the cave, they didn't even pay attention to the monument, which if they would have paid attention to the monument, they would have known it was a monument to Zahir, the god of death, poison, and treachery. So anyway, so they went into the cave, setting off an alarm. The hand thing I was explaining was a ward for alarm. So a really loud alarm went off. As they billowed into the room after the alarm went off, there were 2 doors, one to the right, one straight ahead. The one straight ahead, on the other side of it, they heard moaning and voices, or they heard human voices, sorry. Ended up being zombies. To the right was a storage room. Nothing really in there, just mundane storage stuff. When they went through the next door, they saw 4 zombies, 2 on each side that were chained to the wall, and they could come to the center of the room almost, but that was about it. They were kind of restricted in their movement. And I told the players, I said, if you guys would have thought of this, I would have just fast forwarded it and you said you killed them all. They could have sat there and used their cantrips to kill them and moved on without having any issues. They did decide to get into melee combat with them, with their fighters and stuff. So hacked them down, moved on. And our cleric used her turn undead there. And she only gets that once per day. So anyway, so then they passed through that and they opened the door to peek, and it was a very warm, hot room. And noticed that there was really nothing in there. So they just opened the door completely, and it was really warm and dry. And they noticed there was like a clear ooze with a skeleton in it that they could put two and two together and realize it was also a zombie. They had its arm cut off, basically. And it was just all bones in it. And this ooze was bubbling. And then as they stood there longer, I said, okay, and now you can tell that the floor changes a little bit. If you go 10 feet forward, the color changes. And then that goes on for 20 feet, and then it changes back again. So they like poked it and threw a zombie arm on it. Nothing happened. Finally, everyone started walking across it, and I made them all roll constitution checks. And the second to last person, who was our wizard, tried to do it and failed his constitution check. And the way I had planned it is it's a hot plate. And so when you step on it, it burns your feet, basically, if you can't make the con save. And so my logic was that he just doesn't have good shoes on anyway. So yeah, his feet got burned for every step. I rolled a d4. So for 20 feet, that's 4 rolls of 1d4. He got across. I think he only suffered like 6 or 7 damage. Wasn't too bad. Then the next door goes into an S-turn hallway that's only a single file. They managed to pin a zombie behind the door, because there were 4 zombies there, and fight the other 3 zombies. Well, they could only get 1 fighter in there. And then the wizard and sorcerer were casting spells over her shoulder at the zombies that they could actually see before the turn, which was only 1 at a time, basically. Wiped them out, came up to some double doors, opened up into a room that had 6 zombies, and then in a room that didn't have a door behind it, they could see a necromancer. Very clearly a necromancer. He had a necklace with a small black hand, like tiny shriveled black hand. He had a very bright purple robe with the cowl that comes up really high. And he had like a helmet thing that covered like his ears and everything, and you could barely see his face, right? And his hands, he had black gauntlets on. And a staff that had a hand at the end holding an orb. There was a throne behind him, and then a chest next to that. They could also see in this room to the right was double doors again. So the very first thing that happened, since the alarm spell worked for that, the necromancer, he could hear it. He had the surprise round, and he cast. Well, I had him cast Tasha's Hideous Laughter on our sword and board fighter. And the sword and board fighter made the save. So I told the fighter, you start to feel a sudden urge to laugh and quickly shake it off, realizing there's nothing funny about this. Then the necromancer moved over towards the corner. The players could only engage with the zombies, and so they started to. And our cleric cast silence into the back of the room towards the necromancer, like on the point, basically. So then all the players started fighting the zombies and doing their thing. Somebody, before the cleric did that, hit the necromancer with a spell. I can't remember which one, but hit him. He took some good damage too. Maybe 2 players hit him. When it came to the zombies' turn, they attacked the players. And then when it came to the necromancer's turn, he went and, I know what happened. The wizard cast Flaming Sphere, I believe, and it deals like 2d6 damage and stuff. But basically, the necromancer ended up escaping the next turn, on his turn. He just went out a secret wall, and they could see it like disappear and then magically appear again. And so he left. So they fought the zombies, killed all the zombies eventually, went into this room off to the side after they had taken some good damage. No, I mean, not a lot. It was actually pretty minimal. You know, your wizard took a little bit. I think, actually, I don't think the wizard took any. I don't think the sorcerer took any damage. I don't think the cleric took any damage. You really only had one fighter take damage, and they were like panicked about it because they got down within 7 hit points. So they ended up going into the side room, which they found out was the bed chamber, and they could smell smoke before they went in there. When they went in there, they could see the smoke coming from a metal footlocker that had a skeleton keyhole. And so they checked for traps and stuff and popped it open and found a bunch of burning papers. And so they put out the fire and sifted through, and at the very bottom, they had found a letter. The letter was addressed to this person, didn't have a name, and basically said, "You're one of the 8 lieutenants of death. Meet on the 4th day of Zahir at the temple near Stonehall Keep." Now, it doesn't say what temple. It doesn't say which side of Stonehall Keep. Stonehall Keep is the largest city on the continent, or one of the largest cities on the continent. So they have enough to start figuring things out. The letter also had the black hand that was from the doors of the missing people, and it also had the seal of Zahir, which is a skull with a snake wrapped around it and through it. So they got that information, searched around, didn't find anything else. They could tell that when he heard the alarm, which took him like 10 or 15 minutes to get through this place, that he must have went in there, threw all the papers in this and started burning it, and must have went through his dresser and grabbed as much as he could, threw it in something, and basically got ready to go anyway, just in case. So that's what they found. Then there was a chest next to the throne. So they went over to it and saw 2 openings, 2 small openings. The roguish type sorcerer started using her tools to try and look into those openings. And as she did, teeth clamped down. It opened a mouth that clamped down. It ended up being a mimic. After it bit down, it shot. It was supposed to shoot 22 different hands in the air. It's crawling claws. I ended up choosing, I think, 11 or 12, and just spread out dice to represent them all over. And well, then the hands crawled up on one of the fighters. I had 8 of them on one fighter, and the rest were just wherever. And that was because the fighter was the closest to all of them. The wizard did, what is it, Thunder Strike or something like that? Thunderous Wave or something. And so I made the fighter roll a con save. And originally I ruled that the hands wouldn't hurt. And they're on him. I mean, they're climbing him, so they're grasped onto him. So originally I ruled, well, no damage is dealt to the hands. And my reasoning for this is if you read the silence spell, Thunderous Wave or Thunder spells don't hurt for anybody that's within the effects of the silent wave or the silent spell. So that was my reasoning for it. The hands don't have ears, so they shouldn't suffer anything to do with that. Shouldn't hurt them. But then, they're like, well, they should have to make a save to not be knocked backwards. So I made the ruling, they'll take half damage, and if they fail the save, they'll get knocked off. So automatically they only take half damage from this, and they'll get knocked off and backwards if they fail the save. Well, half damage for all of them was still enough to kill them. They have like 4 hit points. So he dropped like 8 of them right there. So I should have went with the original plan of 22. So anyways, that did that. There were only a couple left. They hacked through them, eventually killed the mimic that hurt them a little bit. They spent 10 minutes for prayer of healing. The ones who weren't hurt were looking around and stuff. And finally, they figured out after 15 minutes how to get the mystery door open, basically, the secret door in the back. When they did, there were 2 skeletons ready for them with a sword and tattered up armor. And so they were attacked. The wizard was attacked first, and then our fighter. So that went on. After they disposed of them pretty easily, they noticed that there was a metal bar to the side that had leather wrapped around it. It was obviously to tie the reins of a horse, very clear. And then there was hanging moss behind where the skeletons were standing originally, and you could see sunlight through it. And it was only like 1 in the afternoon. So they did a little look. They could see some hoof prints near that, but they weren't very deep, which they noticed was kind of odd. And that's where we ended the session. I told them that they could find a spot to set up camp for the night before going back to the base. And then I told them on a knowledge religion check, they could find out, that this isn't a real calendar. Like, this isn't the standard calendar used. This is a very cryptic calendar for the 4th full moon of Zahir. And so they knew it was a few months out still. So not to need to rush randomly on a wild goose chase. And that was where we ended the session. So yeah, it went okay. Some of the things I noticed, again, when they were arguing about treasure, the cleric wanted the magic missile because she says she's useless in combat. And I was thinking about this, and no, she's not. She actually is the second, on average, the second highest damage dealer. Her and the one fighter both have the highest possible AC right now of 18. The only reason I would say she's not as good as him on defense like that is because he has the heavy armor master, which gives him the 3 to damage reduction, basically. So 3 off of any regular attacks on him, so non-magical. So yeah, she has a shield and a mace, which a mace is 2d4. Plus she is a +3 on top of that. So she's a +5 to hit. She's 2d4 +3 damage. The fighter, whose sword and board is using a longsword, I believe, which is 1d8. And so on average, his sword alone is worse than her mace. And his plus to hit, I think he's a +5 to hit. And so he'd have the +3 damage. He might be a +4, but ultimately, that's a wash then. They're equal on damage output, worst case scenario. But yeah, so that's just talking about melee combat. She also obviously has Guiding Bolt because she's a cleric of life, which is 4d6. So she could actually do more damage than anybody in the party if she wants. She also has the ability to heal people. She also has cantrips. There's a lot of different things. The other fighter, who's a half-orc fighter, has 17 armor class because they took the defense, I think it's defense, as the fighter ability at first level, which put her armor class up by 1. So now she's 17. She uses a maul, so that's 2d6 plus her strength modifier. I believe her strength is a +4 or +5. So with the proficiency, she's at least a +6 to hit. For damage, she's a +4, so it's 2d6 +4. So ultimately, she's the best damage dealer, but her defense isn't as good by 1 AC, which is 5%, of the time being hit. So yeah, I guess long story short is our cleric is actually, if she used her fighter or her cleric as in frontline stuff, she's very useful, very useful. The thing I've noticed is she views herself as a combat medic, basically. And the one fighter with the sword and board and our wizard treat her that way. Like, no, you are our combat medic, basically. You run around healing. And she treats herself that way. The group is very... And like I said, I think it's kind of funny, actually. They're very predictable. You got the sword and board fighter just rushes into combat. He is impatient when it comes to strategizing or talking about things. He's combat, boom, boom, hack and slash, completely fine. The wizard is serving as trying to be our diplomat and talker, which that's fine. Our sorcerer in the group, which is my wife, she's a little quiet, and I I'll be honest, I don't hear her half the time. There's always 3 people, 4 people talking at a time in the game, it seems. And so I ignore half the people when they're talking anyway, and usually focus on the first person I hear until they're done talking. And then I go to the second person I heard talk. So I overlook my wife's talking sometimes because she's a little quieter and doesn't get caught up in all the debating back and forth about stuff. When she does, it doesn't seem like they listen, and that's between them. And there's been a couple instances I've noticed of people being on their phones the whole time, or a lot of the time. Maybe they're bored, and that's on me. So some things I need to think about for future sessions for sure. We're going to play again sometime in January, just because the holidays are so busy. But yeah, so we're going to come up with something for that, and then yeah, we'll see how it goes. They have some seeds. We'll see what where they're going to go with that. They have a big letter that tells them something. See if they figure anything out about that. And yeah. So anyways, that is it. That is how the Mystery of the Black Hand went for our 3rd session. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe. Maybe you have some tips on how I should handle some of these things. Maybe you just care to weigh in on the story a little bit. The basic premise of the story so far has been that people have gone missing. As they went missing, the next morning, there'd be a black hand on their door. There were no signs of struggle for the most part. Nobody in the house heard anything. Even people in the same room as the person when they went missing didn't hear anything. Oh, and behind the throne, they found the dead body of the innkeeper. Missing his arms, though. So, yeah, so they found him dead behind the throne in the necromancer, by the necromancer. So, yeah. But yeah, again, please be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and share this video. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.